that is legacy. It's mum and dad making decisions with the whole family being involved in helping them to understand the impact of the decisions they have to make. And that comes from being really transparent and open as individuals.
Welcome to hard ground. Welcome to hard ground.
Well, you want to introduce Jess first.
Yeah, hi, Jess.
Jess is a legend.
Hi.
Introducing Jess Cavanagh to an episode of Hard Ground. Jess Cavanagh is a general manager of Proactive Succession, and it's probably one of the most relevant conversations that we can really be having inside of this family business and farming conversation. Some of the issues and the things that affect us from the internal aspect. We're always assailed by the externals. And we're going to go for this deep dive into the internals, and this is a sore conversation for many.
Yes.
And we understand that. We all understand it.
Yeah.
I understand that too. And this is going to be a great dialogue as well, because we've been through a bit here and there. And but at the same time, I don't think we can stress enough of the necessity to have these conversations. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Jess.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I think good intro, because yes, it's necessary. Yes, it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do as a family. But I don't understand why we run businesses for years and years and years, sometimes generations, without putting an appropriate amount of time into understanding what comes next. I feel like it's a bit of a fruitless task if we're just not having the conversation and having control over the direction of the business when it's time for us to exit as parents. So
it's a real it's a real culture thing, isn't it? Like that it's almost taboo to talk about working on the business. We just have to always work in the business. But we won't spend time or finances working on where it's going from here.
Yeah. And I think, Steph, particularly anything that leads to us being vulnerable as people, or where it might allude to having communication challenges, or that everything isn't completely rosy from an exterior perspective. I think people see engaging external help for succession planning as a weakness rather than, an ability to find strength.
That's a great point.
I would suggest... Yeah, I mean, I've never come across a family that can manage this without external help. It's just something that we don't naturally do well as families.
Can I ask, in your experience, why do you think people feel like it's a weakness?
I think people are really, I would say particularly farming, we're pretty stoic as a culture and as a type of people. Like, if you think back to the origins of Australian farmers, it was, often immigrant families, often really private people, left the metropolitan areas, went bush, became farmers. They're obviously, fairly introverted types of people back in the day, and chose to be away from people. And as, generations have gone on, we're obviously not all introverts in agriculture now. There's a great spread of people. But I think the origins to that conversation being hard are, we are fiercely independent. We are capable of doing hard things on our own. We overcome millions of challenges every year being farmers. So the thought of having to outsource and admit that we need help with something, I think makes us really uncomfortable as an industry and as a type of person, which my perspective on that is, it's because I'm a similar age to you guys. I'm 40. I think it's our generation's responsibility. I know you're younger, Steph, slightly younger.
It's ever so slightly, but I'm hanging on, Jess.
Hang on there, hang on. But it's our responsibility to change the story there. That succession planning is a weakness, that it's not necessary to engage external help, that it's something that we can ignore until the 11th hour. Obviously, the opportunity for succession to be successful is far greater if we approach the conversation early and give ourselves more options, which time lends itself to doing. So if we wait, we're really cutting our nose off to spite our face.
I think Jess, like this is super interesting because I haven't heard anybody really talk about that before, like regarding sort of like the history and the origin of why we are the way we are. And to hear you speak about the fact, it actually it resonates. Like it does. It's that that frontierman style attitude that is, we go out into the world, we carve into the hardness of the soil, we toil, day in and day out. We sort of,
pride
there is a certain, pride in our ability to affect the landscape that we see around us. That's a part of what we also enjoy, and we love that as well. It's like, you put up a fence, you bring a greater yield to a growth of wheat or loosen bales or whatever it is that you do. But then when you, like you also mentioned, Jess, which is, I think, one of the real pinpoints, one of the key points is exposure. Like, we don't like being exposed one bit in the things that we...
Which is quite funny. That's quite funny because the only thing we have control over, and really how much control do we really have over it, is what's happening with our dirt on our paddock. And if it doesn't rain, like there's a lot of variables inside that, or if we get aphids, or if we get locust plague, or if we get, there's a million things that control what we have control over or impact what we have control over. I would say most of the other things we have no control over. We have no control over the markets, the seasons, the interest rates. They're all things that supply. Like, how much trouble is everyone going to have getting urea this year? We can't afford to fill our tractors, so on and so forth. But we cling on to the few things that we can control. And I think really farmers have done a great job of influencing their families to progress into the industry. But now is a time that the younger generation are putting their hand up, and arguably for a long time, and saying, we need to have a little bit of control over our destiny. We want clarity about the future. What are we signing up for here? Like, at the moment, this is your legacy, not mine. I would like to have, a part in this conversation.
What you just said there regarding control, this is really interesting, regarding exposure and control, because you're right, it is funny. We don't have control of Jack, really. Out of most industries, we have the most variables. I've done a lot of business like development and stuff like that with other industry types and things like that. When they hear about farming, they're like, what the hell are you doing? What is the point of that? You can't control Jack. Okay, it's like, yeah, you're damn right we can't. But what we can't control, we can also hide in. The one thing that we can control is the decisions we make and the way that we think about something. We can't hide from that if we're exposed inside of that. So the only accountability that we've got is on ourselves. And that is very triggering, especially for, well, need to say it, but a lot of guys, like I know a lot of men that do not want to do that. They'd rather go and, dig up the soil, the back paddock with their bare hands than to expose some of the things that are going on inside here.
That's another really good point, Josh, because I wouldn't even have a go at assuming statistically how many people become farmers because they like having their hands in the dirt, or they like the livestock, or they like driving a header, or whatever it is. I don't think many people consciously become farmers because they love running a business, because they love the numbers, because they love the analytics or the strategic side of why we make decisions. But that is a side that is really required in succession planning. So I think, or we're exposing where our weaknesses are, because when we're analysing our businesses to understand what the business is capable of producing for the family, both exiting parents and, off-farm children and incoming children, if the business hasn't been run well, or there's some, maybe a better way of looking at that is, we need to be able to analyse where the room for uplift is, because that's where the opportunity lies. But I think farmers...
Sorry, just on that point, Jess, this is so funny. My dad, he just gets featured all the time because this is my closest reference, but no other business would run like this.
Good on you, Dave.
We love you. We love you, Dad. But no other business would run like this. This is the crazy thing about farming. We beat ourselves up when we have to outsource accounting, outsource financial help. My dad's like, our business would be dead in the water without our accountant and our financial advisor and every other person that we have coming in to say, hey guys, have you zoomed out and have you looked at the big picture here? Have you done X, Y, Z? But in farming, heaven forbid we do that, because we should be able to do it all ourselves. That is the wild thing that I find about farming, because the expectation that we have on ourselves to run a multi-million-dollar show without all these experts, and experts that train in just one facet. That's the biggest thing. They just train in one facet of this of their target industry to be an expert at that, and farmers think they should be across all of it.
Yeah, exactly. We use this in every kind of presentation or process that we engage in. We share a slide, and you guys might remember it, and maybe not as well, because it's one slide of many. But it's a slide of a family business puzzle with lots of different puzzle pieces consuming areas of running the business. So we'd have, for example, production, which obviously as farmers we're very good at. That's what we're in it for. We have marketing, which most farmers are quite good at. And then we have lots of things above the line, succession being one of them, that we probably haven't put enough attention into. And to your point, Steph, a lot of them do require outsourcing or gaining extra knowledge to be able to do those bits well. And I think that really relies upon the type of person that becomes a farmer is one that, loves being outdoors generally, doesn't want to sit in an office, or loves the ingenuity of being a farmer. Like, I think that the number one word that I think of when I think of farmer is problem solver. They like to be physically solving problems. How do we have a short-term stopgap for this bigger thing that we know is going to cost us a lot of money? Like, how do we actually rig something up to do that job? And again, that doesn't necessarily align with wanting to be in and being strategic in our businesses. So I think the fact that it doesn't feel natural to want to do that strategic side necessarily, and then on top of that, to have to call someone and say, will you help me with it? It all just sounds a bit hard for a lot of people. I guess for me personally, and the reason that I work in this space and why I find it so rewarding is I think every farm business, obviously no two are the same and no two family are the same. So the opportunity to create bespoke outcomes which are aligned to the people and the ability within the business, that's what's so rewarding. And that only happens if you do engage externals who can guide you in those conversations to find, what is your niche, what is something that will work for you, and how do we retain and remain transparent within our family so that everybody can be really happy with the outcomes that we come to as parents? How do we, because to me that's legacy. Legacy is designing outcomes which everybody can say, that might not be my perfect solution, but it's something I can live with, and it's something that I've seen mum and dad go through a process to choose. So that is legacy. It's mum and dad making decisions with the whole family being involved in helping them to understand the impact of the decisions they have to make. And that comes from being really transparent and open as individuals. And then being able to say as the next generation, well, you know what, like I can live with that. That's mum and dad's choice. We were involved in the process. We're very lucky to have been involved, and we haven't been shut out from decision making. And we can honour the decisions that mum and dad are making. I think that's what it's really all about.
Jess, shifting gears, why are you doing this?
Good question. Interestingly, like Brad is a first generation farmer, which I always find quite interesting, like how and who would get into this if it hadn't been part of your upbringing, firstly. And secondly, I am the daughter of a third generation farmer, and my dad is in business with his three cousins who are brothers, and he's like the four directors of the business. So
wow,
it's a fairly, and Brad, along with two of my cousins who are not brothers, are managers in this business. So I think I loved, it's pretty complex, but I love dissecting family dynamic. I find that really interesting. I love the impact of generational change and how we're doing things differently based on our generation, based on exposure to other parts of the industry and not the industry as well. That has a big impact on how younger generations are doing things. I think I just really like people. I like talking to people. I like connecting with people. I like people getting excited about things. It's a lot of this process is people having these great ideas. And like above all, I guess this is Proactive's underlying KPI is helping families find bespoke outcomes that helps to retain harmony. Like we want families to be harmonious. So
we want the barbecues at the end of the day.
Exactly. Yeah. Like let's share Christmas. Let's choose the feast, not the fight. I think that's really why I'm in it. My background is in law and found the red tape of the legal industry pretty restrictive for creative thinking, I guess. Like I just felt a bit burdened, like personally burdened by the legal industry.
So you were in family law. You were in family law, Jess. So did you see the other side of what this sort of looks like if it doesn't get settled prior?
Yes, and I guess I saw an area of law that I was fairly repelled from working in, which was anything involving kids. Like I didn't want any involvement in law where, a marriage separation, and this is actually all highly relevant to succession, because I think we can create great outcomes in a succession process which won't tear a family farm apart, which is contrary to why a lot of people say they don't want to engage. A lot of people say I can't because I don't want to involve my daughter-in-law, or I don't want to involve my son-in-law, or we don't want to transition to the next generation yet because we don't want the farm being sold from under us. So I guess I saw a lot of things in law which made me realise we do succession with, facilitators like what Proactive has, because firstly, they're not bound by being lawyers. We're not like acting in a legislative way in how we're guiding families to make decisions. So we don't have the red tape. And secondly, what you see in as a lawyer or in a courtroom relating to succession is where there has been none of these conversations. There's been decisions made that have been passed down which people don't agree with, and then
it goes to
atomic
court.
bomb. Exactly. Yeah. So I see this as very preventative, and I'd much rather be involved in a preventative way than reacting to somebody having a hard time accepting a decision. I think that's not it's not a very fun area of law to be in. That's for sure.
It's interesting, Jess. We've employed your services, Proactive Services, in the past. And one of the things, when I first engaged you regarding this, I think it was off the back of, listening to yourself and meeting Isabel Knight as well. It was just as a one of the sons of a farmer coming in and struggling inside of the zone, which I know firsthand what that's like. Now, it's an awful place you can find yourself in, very frustrating, very a place you can get lost in. Put it that way. You can get yourself to the frustrating point where it becomes very dark, and you don't know what that entails further down the line. That can escalate. Because you're basically it's family, it's honouring your mother and father, and then it's also the fact that you're literally tired financially and you don't know where else you can really go. And I think a lot of the time people find themselves sort of stuck in this dichotomy of how do I even go here? How do I approach this conversation? Is there any answer to this? And just to be able to speak to the likes of yourself and others was, wow, at least we can talk to someone about this, and I'm not alone in this. I'm not alone in this, because there's a desperate sense of loneliness, because you're isolated as it is out in the land, and then if you've got siblings that just don't think the way that you do, or you're barking, blah blah blah, and we are a private people by nature. We don't like to talk about it. So you don't get down the pub and necessarily start airing your dirty laundry, because you know it includes other people. You know, we're in tight communities. You know, and the tighter the community,
the more everybody knows everybody's business.
Knows each other's business, and that's the sort of thing. It's like, oh, we're not going to do that. You know, like we still have to be able to show our faces, damn it. And I mean, like, you know, so I think it's like there is a beautiful reward or rewardingness that I could imagine occurs for you doing something like this for people such as ourselves.
Yeah, oh, it's extremely meaningful work, particularly where you can get to a point. Well, I think when you start a process, there's always some family members that are more engaged with others. That's pretty normal. It's fairly rare that you have every family member engaged 100%. And I think watching that evolve in a family and trust building, and like, I think you used the expression before, like a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Like, we've started this, it's really hard. Everybody's in the same boat. Talking to people that make you realise we're not the first people that have felt this way. I think that's, you know, somewhat reassuring. And just watching people evolve and step into the space of knowing their part in the process, that's really rewarding. And then at the end of a succession process where you get to the point and families actually start implementing what they agree, that's where the real value is, both for the family and for facilitators, because it's no good coming up with a document that is a report and saying, oh yeah, we'll do this, but no one actually walks out and starts championing those outcomes. So the real value is in implementation, where you see families who say, we're going to do these things, or we're going to grow to this scale, or we're going to do, I mean, I think where I see people feel the most reward is when they walk into a process and they think, like, this is mums and dads, thinking, I can't afford to do anything for my off-farm kids because we need to keep equity within the business at a certain level, and we know we need to figure out a way to exit ourselves. So our off-farm kids are going to have to wait. But when they realise the value of doing something small early and what that has capacity to grow to for those kids who, in some cases, were never expecting anything, that is so amazing. Like, that is the really good stuff, where you see families do things that they never thought were possible. It's just so beautiful and very binding for the family, like really wonderfully binding.
Where do you find the most resistance, Jess, to this process? Like, when we talk about, like, when we hear about all these horror stories associated with succession planning and things like that, the blow-ups, the nuclear bombs dropping, all that kind of thing, where does that come from?
I think, generalizing, I'd say probably the dad is still the hardest to get over the line in a succession process. And I think part of that is the knowing that they have to be vulnerable, which is often really tough for the person who considers themselves the head of the family. And I think the second real factor for a dad is that it feels like it's all his problem. Like, particularly when assets are passed down the patriarchal generational line and he's, you know, considered himself a custodian. I think the thought of finding outcomes that can release him and you know, his wife, so mum in this case, how can we release us? How can we give an opportunity to next generation farmers? And how can we help our off-farm kids? Those three things feel just massive for a dad. So I think that that's still the main reason that we have so much resistance from dads is feeling like it's all his problem and just not generally not wanting to lose control.
And what about for a dad though who also doesn't want to step out? Because one of the questions that we had come in was, how long should I hang in here in this process, whether they've started succession or not started succession, but the patriarch of the family has said, like, well, I'm going with my boots on, so I'm going to be 95 before I stop calling the shots. So that puts you in your 50s. And, you know, that was one of these questions, was like, should I hang in here or should I get out and go do my own thing?
Yeah.
And how
good question. You know, I think we work with a lot of dads who start a succession process by saying, I'm going to die in my boots and I never want to hand over control. Well, probably less so the latter, to be honest. I think of a lot of the families we work with, the dad will say, I want to die in my boots. Like, I don't want anyone to tell me I can't do a boundary check or be checking use lambing or whatever it is.
Are you saying that's often, the majority? Sorry.
Majority want to stay active in some way. However, usually there's an evolution of thinking when particularly the dad is able to hear their children in a setting, like adult children, in a setting where they are independent adults and not just acting like their child. So obviously we're engaging with, generally 30 to 40-year-old younger generation family members where they're engaged with us as adults, not as children, even though parents see them as children. Exactly. So when those children are able to represent their perspectives and are seen as adults by their parents, I mean, it's pretty natural for parents to see their children as children for the entirety of their lives. But when parents are able to view their children as adults, there can be a little bit of a light bulb go off that we're all about sitting in each other's shoes and understanding each other's perspective. And often it's that the dad will say, well, gosh, like that's how old I was when I took over from my dad. And I don't necessarily mean that decisions have to be made where dad is no longer allowed on the property. Like most of the time that's not the case. It's usually that let's hand over all the burden, the responsibility and the financial management to the younger generation. So they can make decisions, but we're capable of slotting in wherever they need us. And most of the time, the younger generation, when they have financial and operational control of the business, are choosing for their parents to hang around longer. So we have access to the help and knowledge from the generation before us, but we're the ones responsible, or the buck stops with us, which means everybody's getting part of what they want. I would say, to answer the question that you received, Steph, there will come a time where that conversation will be too late. And if we're talking about, that Proactive does have a little bit of a magic number theory in the background as to kind of the oldest age that we will work with, because our ability to make decisions and embrace change gets much harder as we age. So I don't know many people over the age of 70 that can engage in dramatic change, and it is dramatic because we're saying, righto, let's find ways to fund you other than you drawing from the farm business for the rest of your life. Most people aren't choosing that when they retire. Most people are choosing to build complete financial independence for their future. So if we leave those decisions until 70, how much time have we actually got to build that independent bucket? Like we've got a short period of time. So if we're making that decision when we're in our late 50s or early 60s, and we say we want to be independent by the time we're 70, let's say, again, that doesn't mean shipping mum and dad off to the coast to die. That just means handing over financial and operational control. So say we set a target and we've got 10 years to achieve a target. That's a lot longer than 1 or 2. So if we leave the decision to start having conversations around succession until after 70, the chances of being able to do everything on the wish list are slim. We've got less time.
And what about for the child involved? I'm using that in air quotes because obviously they're a fully fledged adult with their own children now, but as far as the farming, the farming.
Yeah.
Like how I think this guy was asking like, hey, I'm 48 and my dad's still calling the shots. He continues to say it'll all be yours one day.
Oh, he's still young.
But I'm still waiting. How long should I wait? How long should I believe that? Yeah. Because I know from
how long can he put up with it?
That's
my question. How long can you tolerate not being in control of your own destiny? Because it's one thing to say this will all be yours one day. Like this is a real, Mufasa Simba moment. Everything the light touches will be yours. Great. I've got a family to support. I've got no equity in anything. I've got no control over how I'm spending my time. And usually, farming isn't a high-paying industry unless you're the person that owns the checkbook. And even in those cases, sometimes it's still pretty hard to justify paying ourselves well. But if you're just on wages and often not a big enough wage to be investing in other things, the question probably is, how long can you tolerate that for? Because I think we need to be in control of our own destiny, or at least have certainty around when we will be.
It's really interesting. Really interesting. That is
very challenging.
I mean, it's a I mean, because I think it's like one of the things, and being a bit vulnerable on this one, but I guess this is the conversation to be. But you know, like it's. I think that there's a couple of different ways that one approaches this, from say like the sun sitting in the seat moment, and a lot of the time I think it has to do with like father-son relationships and how that runs its course. You got, you know, bulls in the pen, butting heads, etc. And
young bull.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got, you know, but dad holds the reins, and for the most part the cards, with the promise that yes, it'll all be yours, Simba. And the time ticks on, and then there is a flick over point in time where the son starts to go, well, gee, time is getting on, and you know, these are the best years of my life, so to speak. I'm not getting younger. I'm not as young as I was. You know, I came on when I was 20, and now I'm, you know, 48 or whatever, and or not even, or you know, 30, you're in your 30s or whatever, and you're thinking, nothing's really changing, and then what occurs is that there becomes, you know, that can flick over to, well, there's an entitlement, and the entitlement switch comes across to, well, this is not fair, it's not right, it's not fair, I deserve more than what I'm getting, and so to speak, like the whoever it was that was asking that question. It's like, okay, how long do I wait? Yeah, damn good question. What am I doing about, you know, what I've been given? This is the difference. It's a hard one, because I took this as I deserved more. I should have received more control. I should have had this. I should have had that. All the while ignoring the reality that was sitting in front of me, was that I couldn't change Dad. I held the entitlement point in my mind, and I wanted him to realize how much pain he was causing in my life, and that led to a chaos that had quite the
effect.
Well, it had a legacy. It had quite the legacy, and that you know. It had chaos inside of our home, had chaos inside of our lives. It had a lot of chaos inside of his life. Like, you talk about the chaos, the bomb being dropped. Yeah, we were, you know, we were doing a fair bombing raid there between each other, and things like that. So, you know, but when I look back on it, and I work with him still to this day, he has not slowed down one bit. He's still going out. He's 70. He turned 70 last week, and he's still, like, you know, hooking in. But the peace has come as a result of, I don't deserve shit. And that man's a blessing. And you know what? Whilst he wants to do what he wants to do, what can I do with what I don't have control of, I keep wanting control of, and it keeps on being a straight up no.
So how much, Josh, how much of your change of perspective in you know, I'm not owed shit, for example, how much of that came from hearing your dad's perspective rather than making assumptions about his perspective?
None of it.
Very little, I suppose. Not none of it, but yeah, a little, because
I think from outside looking in, and this was very interesting. We talked to the Jackson brothers the other day. It comes from where your values come from. It's so much deeper than that. It was from, and you know, not to, you know, I don't know. I mean, people know that we have a relationship with God, and we don't talk about this all the time. But when we spoke about it with the Jackson brothers, they were like, we grew up knowing that we don't deserve anything. Everything we are given is a gift. And the entitlement that we seem to come into the industry with is a selfish one. And we were raised by that good book to not be selfish. And even though that's our human nature, that's how we roll, you know,
It's also what's demonstrated to us to a large degree.
Constantly, yep. And they were stewarded very well by their father in that way. Like, it was demonstrated to them, you know, to think of each other before thinking of yourself.
Didn't really think about that.
What can each, and the shift I saw in Josh was a shift when he came to have a relationship with God. And like, I mean, correctly if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, it did. It absolutely.
It was a massive flip, because he stopped trying to change his dad and started asking, well, what can I do about myself in this scenario? Yeah. And it was a whole nother ball game. Really, I mean, correct me if that's not.
No, you're right, and I think what you're saying, Jess, or what you were sort of with that question was like, did the dialogue help with the awareness of that? We had constant dialogue every day in this, that, and the other. I can read my dad like a book, or like I like to boast, but it was more that I shut up. I just shut up for a second. And I put myself in a different seat for a second. I was like, hang on a second, this guy's done. He's still working his backside off for all of this, and all I'm doing is causing a whole lot of chaos. And I'm not saying that I'm not necessarily holding up a mirror to him and saying, you're not doing what you reckon you said you're going to do. Okay, that's when it's got to stop. If that does that make sense? Like, you stop trying to shove it down their throat and trying to kick them off the farm, and start trying to recognize where, okay, how do we come to that place? How do we come to that place where there is that harmony that we're trying to achieve there, Jess?
Well, I think that's probably another way, even if it wasn't through what Dad shared with you from a perspective, as like in terms of demonstrating his perspective. It's about you getting in someone else's shoes. So that comes from having an opportunity to do that. Like, that is not natural for families. Like, two kids fighting over a toy, one of them isn't going to say, well, you know what, maybe it is her go. Like, that's not what kids do. It's not what we do in families. We never really learn. So I think, entering into a process where, one of our facilitators, Steve, describes every family as a prism, with each facet of the prism being unique and representing the unique perspectives, views, hopes, wishes, and dreams of each family member. And we've got to firstly understand our own. We've got to really be able to demonstrate and understand and be able to articulate what our facet looks like. And after that, we need to be able to turn the prism around and look at and really critically analyze and have kindness and forgiveness and willingness to understand the other facets of the prism. So if we can't do that, we won't get harmony. We won't find outcomes that really do represent the views of the whole family. Someone recently asked me, who's the hardest person to work with? And I said a narcissist, because a narcissist genuinely can't do that. No. They can't turn the prism. It's all blurry and foggy for them trying to understand the views of someone else. And if we can't do that, there will be no resolution. There will be no harmony. So back to the question of the 48-year-old son, if both of them aren't willing to see the perspective from the other, then that will have to impact some kind of change. So
and
there has to be a split.
That's what I was thinking too. There also needs to be a line in the sand at some point for people's mental health and their sanity and the ability to, grow your own family in the way that you would like to grow your family. There's all of these other aspects that have to come into it. And in fact, I think it was in our Jackson's Brothers podcast when they were saying that they had a situation where one of the guys, I don't know who it was, but they handed the son had only just gotten the farm. His dad was like in his 90s. He'd just gotten the farm in his 70s, and he passed it straight on 3 years after getting it because he didn't want to repeat the same process, to the next generation and make them sort of hold out as long as he had to. So he put himself last so that they wouldn't experience what he had experienced.
It's also you also got these skip generations where basically the skills and the means to run a business aren't handed over. They're not, and so they're not practiced by the children, and so they get to the point, and then all of a sudden we actually don't know how to do this, but the kids do. So okay.
Well, and I think that's a great point, Josh, because succession isn't just about handing over.
Yes.
Succession is about training, mentoring, like how do we fill gaps in
That's
our
what
team?
I wish. That's what I wish people knew. It's like as soon as I say succession to people, people are like, what? End game. And I'm like, no, start of the game. Start of everything. Amazing. Openness, conversation. Let's get this rolling. Like, how can we do this better? But people have this very, very negative mentality around it. Yeah, it is a stigma.
Yeah, it's a stigma.
And that's why having these kinds of conversations must be had, because it's going to hopefully break that stigma to you know, inspire people to think, okay, this does not mean mum and dad are out. This means how are we going to run this better as a family?
Exactly. I think, you know, the main thing that comes from a succession process, if done well, is a better understanding of the whole family, of each other, a better understanding of how this business can be successful, a plan for when things are operationally tough, right? So if we're in the middle of a rip-roaring drought, or commodity prices go through the floor, or interest rates go through the roof, like some of these things that we're seeing now, we're not lying in bed awake wondering about what the future looks like. We're just thinking, rightio, we have that big plan. We've got that thing that's going to drive us to the point of transition. For now, we can just focus on what we have to do to get through this yucky patch of whatever the industry is throwing at us. So I think that the farmers that do really, really well in a drought or in, operational crisis, are the ones that have the big plan sorted, because they're not niggling about that. They're able to focus on the job. And that comes from really having like role definition, clarity over who does what when, how are we going to transition the roles from mum and dad to the next gen. Like that's if we have that clarity, we can do our jobs really well. And I guess Isabel uses the expression that if we have a plan that everybody is aligned with and for the most part can agree to, then we approach it like we do any other task. We roll our sleeves up and we get the job done. If we don't have the plan and we're not aligned, we're not working towards a common goal. So we're all fluffing about, making assumptions, catastrophizing, instead of just getting the job done.
Yeah,
it's just another job.
And to come back to the question of this guy, I also like to ask people, what have you suggested? Because I asked a couple of guys, as the daughter-in-law, who often comes with this label of like being the elephant in the room or the person that causes trouble or whatever, I would say we have this gift of coming into a situation from the outside and looking at it and going, whoa, guys, did you know that actually it's not normal to throw chairs across the table at each other when you're having a meeting? Or
don't tell me what to do.
Did you?
I just throw a chair if I like it. Far out.
Oh, it ruined your smile.
Get out of my kitchen.
But like, you know, and then because the daughter-in-law deigns to suggest that, hey, that's not maybe the best practice, she's the bad guy. But a couple of these guys that we've spoken to previously said, obviously it's all in your delivery. It's all in like, what can you do? You can actually very softly approach that with your husband or with, you know, whoever you're talking to in the family. So I often like to ask people who say, oh, I got to 58 and my dad was still calling the shots. I like to kind of go, well, what did you attempt to do about it? You know, what did you try and implement? Yeah. I mean, maybe that's not fair. Maybe they're like, yeah, we tried everything and we just met a brick wall. Right. And that is some people's realities.
You get easily discouraged. Like
and you feel really discouraged.
Well, it's not easily. You try. You try to, and this is the thing. It's harder coming from, like you're sort of saying, just like it's harder to get the patriarch across the line. Like, you know, mums want everyone just to get along. Mums want everyone to be sitting at the table. Yeah, want that family harmony. But to get that over the line is, you know, that takes that hard conversation that they don't necessarily want to have. For the most part, really don't want to have.
And it might take you 10 years to convince them to have a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
And that
it's
really
often
is.
that there is an embedded pain point. There's often some fear or pain point, and if we can identify what that is, it's much easier at breaking down the barrier of having some help.
How do you do that?
My commentary or my addition to your point, Steph, never underestimate the value of asking a question rather than sharing an opinion.
Oh, love that.
So sometimes just being asked a question like, Mum and Dad, do you have enough money to fund yourself so that if you want to give us an opportunity to take over, we're not paying for two families, like when the business can't do that. So what do we need to do to make sure you feel financially secure? Rather than, like, we're going to start putting X aside every year. Like, I think that takes control away from parents and makes them feel uncomfortable.
Oh,
so
100%.
Never underestimate the value of asking a question.
It's like uno number 10. Do not try and fix them. It's not going to work. Like if you try and tell,
for something,
they don't want to be fixed.
No, they don't want to be fixed. There's nothing to be fixed. It's like, get over get over yourself. What do you think? Like I've raised you from birth, okay, and this has been the operation that has like provided you everything in life. Now you're going to say, oh, you think that we should have that, do you? That's very interesting. And I've seen that, I've witnessed that, and I'm like, and that can trigger, like all of a sudden it's like, triggers being pulled all over the place, and the Western Front opens up.
Exactly.
And in reality, it's like, use some humility. And I think like what does humility mean? It means thinking about the other person more than yourself. And trying to serve in that space somewhat. Like if you're not coming to try and look at the bigger picture here and try and come from a place of service, but rather like we were saying, the narcissism. We all have a certain amount of narcissism in us, eh? Like we do. We always. It's all about me. It's me.
Yeah. We're designed to do that because we have to survive. So we're designed to be like at whatever stage of life we're at, we're doing what we can to protect ourselves. And in this space, it's about protecting those very, very vulnerable emotions and control. So we don't want to engage a professional to help us with these conversations because we can protect ourselves by not sharing anything. So that's really like for your 48-year-old question asker.
I don't know if he's 48. Sorry, if you're younger.
48 now, mate. Whatever age you are.
Sorry.
Well, I just think that's probably what Dad is protecting. Is those very vulnerable emotions.
Yes.
And I would suggest to anyone who's thinking like when is the right time to start Succession, the earlier the better, because we're not as guarded or we don't have as many boundaries when we're young in making decisions and implementing those as we do when we're older. And then obviously, as I spoke about earlier, the luxury of the outcomes you can produce if you have time on your side are much greater, but also the hurdle of just landing on some decisions is much easier when we're younger. Actually, our risk appetite is greater when we're younger.
I have a great question around that. I talk to a lot of people in their 30s and they say, oh, we're not going to repeat the same mistakes. Like we're going to get onto Succession early. And I would like to know, what could that actually look like? Because at the moment, we have an 11, a 9 and a 7-year-old, plus our in-laws who we work closely with have twins and a 7-year-old as well, and twins under them. So there's 6. We've got 6 kids between us. Now, it would be impractical to start
so far
guessing, and so far, no, I'm not having another baby. Just clarify.
Shop shut.
Shop shut.
Hey, Steph.
Pregnancy announcement. I thought that was going to be pregnancy announcement.
Oh, I wish we had 4. I'm always like, oh, I wish we had 4. But anyway, regardless of the number of children, it seems like, are we starting too early to talk about it now? And if not, what kinds of things would we be talking about now?
I think that's a really valid question because we have a lot of the people approaching Succession, as in making the inquiry to proactive, aren't the decision makers. They're our generation.
Yeah.
And they say, well, we can't get our parents on board, but how can we be prepared? Firstly, I don't want to sound skeptical. I want to sound optimistic. Put your money where your mouth is. When you guys are 50 or like in your late 50s, start engaging help. Don't say we don't want to repeat history and then repeat history.
Yeah.
Like you're too good for that. You're too smart. You're too knowledgeable. You're prepared to listen to people. Like, put your money where your mouth is, firstly. Secondly, we already have little family meetings with our kids. So things like, okay, guys, Dad has a very busy operational period. Does anyone understand why we're doing this thing? So it might be coming up till bull sale or calving or something like that. So the kids are at the stage now, mine are 10, 9 and 7, so very similar to yours, where they understand Dad's really busy because for starters, we're working with animals and animals have needs just like humans. So we've got to tend to the thing that we're saying we're here to look after as farmers. Secondly, that's where money comes from. It doesn't grow on trees. Mum and Dad have to work for money. And if we spend it at the rate that you guys want to, we've got to work really hard to make sure that we can do that. Thirdly, it's always to work towards a goal. So I think breaking down for them operationally why we work, it's to produce income, and the income is to do this thing. So what is the purpose of the business? That's us demonstrating to them what the purpose of the business is. So we say to them, we really want to give you guys a great education. We believe that's the gateway to you making all the decisions that you want to make. Like, obviously their frontal lobes aren't really formed yet. So this is kind of over their head. We say, it's really important that we have a roof over our heads. We can only do that because we're doing this thing which creates income, which helps us to achieve a goal. We talk to them about wanting to have assets outside the farm. Like, we want to be able to have wealth. And I guess these are conversations we can have, but in terms of actions or pre-succession actions, I would say the number one thing you can be doing is growing your wealth outside the business at whatever rate you can. So that when you're approaching the conversation and you're looking at transition, that you have a bucket either that's going to feed you or that can help off-farm kids in whatever their hopes, wishes and dreams are. So
can I just, before you go on, I just want to say two things to that. Firstly, I love that because too often it's an offhanded comment as Dad's running out the door. I'm busy. Not that you do this. But
I explain everything down to detail. Get down to our level.
But like, imagine during harvest, it's wild, and people are going,
yeah, of course, yeah,
so 17 hours a day. I love that you've pre-explained that. You've pre-explained that busy period so that when you're in the thick of it and it's roaring, the kids know. Love that, first of all. Secondly, I would ask, what if you do find yourself in a situation where all your finances are tied up within the family farm as the children, which is often the case, and there is no external outcome and you have no autonomy to make those investments now?
Yeah, tough. I think you just do everything you can in that regard. And I think, again, going back to what legacy really is, more and more the outcome involves when we receive, like when our generation is receiving business and assets, our number one objective that we usually agree in farming families is that we are choosing business continuity. So we want the farm to remain in the family. I want farmers to open their minds to the prospect that when they're choosing that, they're making choices that are not honouring their children that don't want to be farmers. So if you have 3 children and one's going to be a farmer and you say, I've got all my wealth tied up here you are, and I can't do anything for you other kids, that is a choice. That is not an obligation. So more and more, I think, sell 100 acres. What could 100 acres do for a kid that's not going to be a farmer? Like, honestly. Don't be allergic to debt. That's another thing. Like, a lot of farmers that have unencumbered property say we're never having debt, or we're afraid of debt, or we've worked really hard to pay off our debt. If we don't have a purpose for our business, and one of them might be debt repayment, then what are we really working for? Like, it can't just be operational. The reason, like, the motivation for working can't just be having calves on the ground or getting a crop off. It's got to be bigger than that. It's got to be feeding our family, creating educational opportunities, having an awesome retirement. Like, it's got to be those things as well. So sometimes I think the really uncreative succession outcomes come from families who say we've got no choices because all of our equity is tied up in our farm. Like, I would challenge whether that's actually that's a choice. I mean, I guess that's what I want people to be honest about. You can choose that, but that's a choice. It's not, no one's prescribing that outcome to you. So I hope that answers your question. It's much harder when you don't have control or ownership to make decisions about that.
I think that's interesting. It's a good point there, because it is like, I think it is a choice. I think there's that, again, you know, the children that aren't associated, who want to go and do their own thing, who want to, you know, be outside the farm, and the expectation that it should be, you know, I should receive an inheritance, or I should receive this, or I should receive that. And then the other story is that parents are also thinking the same way. It's like, you know, they should receive this, they should receive that, opposed to those who are in the business. And even at the detriment of the farm's longevity or viability, you know, regardless of it. And it's like, well, okay, that's a story, just so you know. It's not.
Yeah.
Not
You're telling yourself that this is real.
It's not a law. It's not a law. Never has been.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Like, you can all go to the Cats Foundation if you really wanted to. But you know, just so you know that that's a decision that you make, and that can be made for a lot of different reasons. And I get it. Like, I understand it. Like, you know, mum and dad want to see that their children all receive what they think might be fair or equal, and you know, there's that grey area, fair and equal, and you know.
But what you're saying, Jess, is that if parents choose not to diversify their income, then it has to come from the farm should they want to help a sibling not on the farm. And
potentially.
in those circumstances, I've heard of scenarios where, because, you know, a lot of people message me in my inbox. Like, they don't say this, they won't comment. They say, I can't comment on your reel, but I'll message you to your private messages, because I can't let someone see what I've said. But yeah, we had to pay out the sister, the two brothers had to pay out the sister. It nearly sunk us. It's millions of dollars worth of assets that we had to offset, pay her. And we couldn't actually afford to do that. They're then put in that position because the previous generation didn't kind of have these conversations early, like you were saying, so that you could come up with a strategy for the sibling who didn't want to be on the farm.
Yeah. I think that, like...
Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
I kind of repel... Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I guess I kind of repel the psychology that siblings are paying out siblings. Like, that's actually not what's happening. It's the parents. So if we think about the business as a vehicle that the parents drive, then they're letting someone else drive their vehicle, right? The next generation on farm are driving it. And they're saying, I want you to drive my car. I'll allow you to drive my car, but you've just got to go via Newcastle and drop something off for me to your sister or your brother who lives there. That is mum and dad choosing how they're using their equity. It's not, it's a condition of siblings taking over the business that mum and dad are saying, we want to use part of our equity in this business to do something for your sibling who is choosing to not farm. Mm-hmm. You are not paying out your sibling. We are choosing to do that with our equity. And then you can have the farm. So I think that there's a lot of psychology around that.
But I think where it comes from is when one sibling works for nothing for 20 years and then that still happens and that puts an incredible amount of financial stress on the farming operation. And like what Josh was saying was, that will, because of the story behind, like, I must help my children equally and fairly, or equal doesn't always equal fair and vice versa, the parents, at the detriment of the health of the business, will still maintain, like, there could be something set up where there's a payout over 20 years or whatever.
There's no, like,
there's just no plan with it.
If you try and do it by yourself, you're going to be very limited.
That's right.
You're very limited.
Yeah.
Whereas you could, for example, employ people with the expertise that you guys have and say, hey, that's actually going to really affect your bottom line and your ability to operate as a company or as a business.
Correct.
Let's look at XYZ structure.
Great. Scope is perspective.
Just for perspective of it.
Is far and above what we don't know, because we don't know what we don't know.
And this brings us back to the point at the very beginning. This is the sort of the trend that we see in the farming community is we think we should know all the answers and we try and do it as if we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we find ourselves in trouble.
We act in unresourceful ways because we don't have all the answers. So when we say, let's say we've got a farm with 10 million equity and we've got 2 kids, and so we say, righto, child in the farming business, we're going to put you to 50% equity. I can tell you now, that's an extremely uncomfortable position to be in, at 50% equity. Not many people would put their hand up and say, I'll happily do that. It is an absolute slog. To me, that is just a completely uncreative solution for somebody who wasn't prepared to have the conversation with all the people that were involved in the decision making. So
and some
I feel so sure that very few off-farm siblings who are choosing for the business to remain in the family, who are recognising that that represents legacy, would want that hard a journey for their sibling.
Yeah, because I've got a friend who's one of 5 sisters, and they all decided, this is in Germany, but they all decided that the one sister who wants to run the farm gets the farm. She just gets it. They don't get anything, in lieu of that, because they, as the sisters, recognize that she's the one taking all the risk. Like people just see it as like dollar signs because on paper it looks really good and they've got property, but at the end of the day it's like golden handcuffs. Everyone in farming,
as long as they're prepared. I mean, I think that there are some grey areas there because, and there are ways to protect this in families as well. But where we say, righto, someone's going to get the lion's share of asset because they're going to continue the family business. Like, you can't just go sell that and go live on the Gold Coast.
Absolutely. And then that's in their clause. She's not allowed to sell the farm, and if she did, it gets split 5 ways. Straight up to all the sisters. Yeah. Absolutely. And I agree with you 100%, of course. But I think sometimes there seems to be little, recognition maybe for the risk that you also take by taking on the family farm and continuing that.
Oh,
could go. Most siblings in our process who aren't choosing to be in the business will pretty happily say, like, I couldn't live that life. I don't want to live that life. I get it. It's very hard, which is why I'm here doing this thing away. And I guess all of this stems back to, if we can have the right facilitated conversations, guided in a way to help everybody understand those different facets of the prism, we will find a way to agree. Like, not wholly and solely, that's impossible. We're unique. But we will find a way to be able to honour what someone else is saying, and that all leads to being able to honour mum and dad's decisions. But if we don't, and we're just making decisions based on assumptions, that's fraught with danger, and the risk is family relationships.
Jess, what is, like, when you look at a family, you're working with families, and you've done this for many years now, where do you find the most resistance in the younger generation around this?
Honestly, from different family members in different ways. So we all kind of get on our stoop about certain things. Like, the farmer will probably share your perspective about, we're the ones doing the hard work, we're taking on all the risk. The off-farm kids will say, well, you get to deduct let's say $40,000 of expenses every year that have to come out of my PAYG income. So we can all get on our stoop about certain things. I don't think it's necessarily any one category of family member, and it's pretty circumstantial in each family. But I think everybody can really get on their stoop about something, and be quite resistant to seeing the perspective of someone else. It takes a fair amount of generosity of spirit to be able to do that.
I like that. It takes a generosity of spirit. And I think that's a really important point, because, I mean, if you're not prepared to at least open up into the conversation with a sense of, like, let's just take the gloves off for a second. Let's peek over the wall, and just sort of be a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more honest. Because I think what happens, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jess, but I think a lot of people experience this. This process it gets ignored, it gets pushed back, it gets, the can gets kicked down the road. with the idea or the mantra, she'll be right. Give it a bit more time. I'm sure it'll sort itself out. And yet, just more water goes under the bridge, and we see resentments grow. Tell us, Jess, like when you start, like where do you see, like when you come across a family that has, like early starters, middle starters, late starters, what does the dynamic look like?
Yeah, good question. So I think the early starters and the ones where parents have been open in, I guess, being able to talk about what the future looks like for them or what their expectations are for the future. And the ones where we haven't had years and years and years of water under the bridge, those ones can come in and say our number one priority is that we have a happy family. So you can forgive a lot if that is your number one perspective. If we're 10 years, 15 years down the track and the number one perspective is that I get to keep all of the farm without hearing the perspective of anyone else, that's when you're going to have these kind of problems where they're choosing the fight, not the feast. So again, the benefit of timing, and I do think a lot of it is, history does repeat itself. If parents have had an absolute dogfight in succession, you've got to work damn hard to change that story for the next generation. You've got to be adamant that won't happen, because I think history repeats itself more often than people are prepared to admit.
That's really interesting. And I have another question too, just because I have a lot of daughter-in-laws that message me about their experiences.
Oh, yeah.
Look at her face. She's like, yeah, I know this one.
I'm one.
I'm one. You're one too. And I think my question is for you to, maybe highlight to the parents, because I actually had a lady the other day make the most horrific comment on one of our reels, which we always do in jest. Say, one girl said, I've been married for 20 years in the farm and I'm still not trusted to have a seat at the table. And she was in good faith about it. She was like, I've kind of come to terms with it, laughy face, whatever. And obviously a mother-in-law in the reply to that comment said, that's because you can take half the farm and the children. We would be foolish to trust you, and you wonder why we won't let you in. And I was like, And I actually said to her, please be respectful of everybody. Like, you're a mother-in-law, but you were a daughter-in-law, and that this daughter-in-law will be a mother-in-law one day too. And in your experience, can you shed some light on if daughter-in-laws are as terrifying as there seems to be a stigma around?
Yeah. Look, I'm sure there are lots of examples where daughter-in-laws are a problem.
Yes, it can't come from nowhere. This stigma can't come from nowhere. I'd just like to acknowledge that for sure. But
However, in my experience, where daughter-in-laws are included, they are more an asset to the family than they are of detriment. Problems arise when daughter-in-laws are not treated like family members. So parents have no control over who their children marry. Absolutely no control. We are not in the dark ages where we can betroth our children.
We can bring it back. We can bring it back, Jess.
Bring it back. Oh my God, who would I choose? I'm just not sure.
I know, you start to get pretty picky when you think you're choosing for your own children.
Well, I think that if I'll just say in-laws, because it's not just
yes, I was going to say son-in-laws as well.
Face the challenge where parents are saying we just want our little family. So there's, I guess probably the most productive way of me speaking about in-laws is to talk about why we do include them. Because firstly, are we really fully understanding the perspective of our children if we're not including their other half? Like the person that they're trusting with their innermost thoughts, that's going to help them to stay accountable, that supports them in their decision-making. Like if we don't have their perspective, are we really ever understanding our own children, firstly?
So
Secondly, there can be a lot of brilliance come from the in-laws because they were raised differently. To your point, Steph, if you walked into the office and someone's throwing a chair across the table, it'd be pretty normal to challenge that if you hadn't been brought up that way. So the insights and the reality check that can come from the daughter-in-law can be the difference between a really uncreative or mediocre plan and a great one. So I think, we need to embrace the brilliance that comes from the in-laws, I should say. Thirdly, if there is a risk, so if they are the kind that's going to sell half the farm, take the kids, wouldn't you rather know that early so that your plan can accommodate that risk?
Absolutely.
I don't see any value in shutting the in-laws out because it's either going to highlight the brilliance or demonstrate the risk.
Yes, I love that.
Let's bring that risky timeline forward so that we can say to a lawyer, we don't want our daughter-in-law or son-in-law to not feel like a family member, but we do value asset protection. So we want to make sure assets stay in our family. We're getting the right advice from the right people that is implemented correctly because we have all the evidence at our fingertips to make those decisions. So the cases where daughter-in-laws or son-in-laws are a problem is when decisions are being made based on an assumption that they are a certain way. And then they will retaliate. They will repel those outcomes because they're being told a problem before they've even had the opportunity to show that they're not. I think that, and the other thing I would say is the greatest way to lose a relationship with your own child is to make the person that they've chosen wrong. So if you don't embrace the person that your child chooses, you are losing your relationship with them. You are not honouring their ability to make decisions, to give back. I know so many in-laws in a family where, let's say a son is working in a farm business and a daughter-in-law is saying, I would love to be involved. I have a taxation degree, or I have, some terrific skill to add to the business, and they're being shut out. That's your loss. That's the family's loss. They could have some real brilliance that they're turning away.
There's so much in this. I know we're getting.
This is the topic in itself.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And we are coming to having to pull plug. But the thing with what you just said, Jess, I think it's so damn important to note, is that. Yes, if you're shutting out your daughter-in-laws, son-in-laws, whatever, you are sending a message direct to your child that you don't trust their judgment. You don't trust anything about what's happening here because it's not under your control. So there is a real lack of faith there. And I would say that if you're a family organisation looking at your own backyard right now and say, well, are the girls involved or not, or the boys, whatever, but for predominantly the girls, if they're not involved, what does that say about the level of trust that is held inside of this family? I reckon there could be probably a correlation. I don't know. Could be. Investigate. Correlation between those who have daughters-in-laws inside at the table and out of the table, and a direct correlation between how messy or long-winded or hard succession planning or these conversations are going to be, and the likelihood of a breakup somewhere down the line because of it.
Yeah, it is actually, we have to evolve as people. We can't just stay in the dark ages forever. It is the number one reason why Proactive's process insists on in-laws being involved. It's not a choice. No one gets to choose. It is prescribed that in-laws are involved because maybe that's the first time for a lot of families that they can see the brilliance or understand the risk. Either way, it brings the important information that you need as parents making decisions. It brings all that information to the table. So they're just additional puzzle pieces that are forming part of your strategy. If you can understand him or her, the in-law, a bit better.
I actually that was one of my favorite things about you guys from the get-go, because all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get to be at the meetings. Straight up. That was just that's the best. Because you feel, I read something the other day that said sometimes an angry daughter-in-law is just because she's been left out. She's just alone.
Oh, 100%.
You know, and she's coming into an environment that's already established and has already been established, and she is expected, or he's expected, to just fall into that and be part of that, which is an incredible culture to be a part of. It really is.
Yeah.
And also, it can be isolating if you're not wrapped up in the arms of your new family and invited into the fold.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and I can
it's not just feeling excluded from the greater family, but it's extremely divisive within a marriage.
Oh,
I think.
absolutely.
And, you know,
because then
the stuff that
the poor guy is like,
aligned on.
my wife's on that side, and then I've got my family on this. It's so terrible.
Well, and if everyone is honest about how they communicate just in their family of origin, like I'm one of 5, if I'm sitting around the table with my 4 siblings and my parents, we switch into an family of origin conversational and communication mode. We're not like accommodating of anyone, so we can just be ourselves. There's no accountability in that setting. There's nobody, giving you a little nudge under the table or a pat on the back to say, actually, remember that thing that we've been agreeing as a family and that, goal we have. You've got to speak up about that. It's very divisive within a marriage. I think to expect a son or a daughter to sit at a table with their family and make decisions in the absence of their chosen person, I think that's very, very hard on the family.
Yeah, and I think I can only sort of speak about it because I feel so much love from Josh's family. Like, I'm just part of the crew, and I love that. But I know so many women who have never been, just not wrapped up, just not accepted, just not like, hey, you're part of
suspicion.
Yeah, you're like
suspicion,
guilty
and
before you've had a chance to prove yourself innocent.
Exactly.
You just come into it feeling like, oh, I'm the risk. Clearly, I'm the risk here.
Yeah,
and it doesn't bode well for anything, because at the end of the day, she's going to be the mother of the grandchildren. She's the wife to your husband, like to the son who's working on the land, and she's probably the one who's going to be, well, in our case, like the sounding board for this guy who comes home, who is, with all of the farmers, like they're under a lot of stress. And so one thing that I find can be difficult is that if you're not at the table, you also don't get a real understanding of what really went on in the room.
Yeah.
And you're making assumptions based on one person's retelling of the story. And really, your husband might be the one in the wrong, and your father-in-law might have been very reasonable. And
very rare, though. Like, no, just put that there.
Just,
It's very rare.
Very rare.
If you're listening, Dad.
Very rare, Gumps. But if in full transparency, if that were the case, Josh and I have the kind of relationship where I'd be like, dude, sorry, but you're in the wrong there, and that's healthy. That's great.
That is not so rare.
And he doesn't.
They don't
know.
like being told that. That's for sure.
No, they
Like
don't. But
watching
how
on
much
someone else's
how
side,
much
that's all.
easier is it when she's in the room, because she can I saw it with my own eyes. I'm not just getting your spin on it. I was there. I know what happened.
Yeah.
It's so positive. Exactly. I think it's so positive.
I agree. I think there's
anyway, that's
a million
another
and one
podcast
reasons why they should be involved.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. That was a great answer. Great answer.
Jess, that has been a very insightful conversation. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate your your experience inside of this field. It's very deep. You've got you've done, I think, you're doing amazing work for the families associated with the Australian agricultural industry as a whole. I think it would be great to have you back on again, because I think there's more to dive into regarding this. I think we get a little bit of it's sort of a one shot and I mean we can go around certain facets, but there's more to be fleshed out here. So thanks so much for coming on, and really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me. Always enjoy catching up with you guys. I will just say, if any of your listeners are interested in understanding a bit more about proactive or succession in quite a general sense, we are hosting an event in Tamworth at Gunnaganoo Station on the 6th of August. if anyone doesn't already follow Proactive on socials, it's a good way to see way too much of me, but also just to understand a little bit about more that event, which is a pretty amazing day.
Will there be lots of succession planners there that day, Jess?
So,
or is it just run by you guys?
Well, it's actually very little about a succession planning process. So what every participant gets is a case study, a fictional case study on a succession process. And then the presenters on the day, on top of as well as Proactive, are the professionals that are specialists in their field to help with implementing a family's outcomes. So it's about having a case study. I guess the real basis of it is the ability to be able to sit in other shoes. And when it's in a case study, with outcomes that are demonstrated, people are able to read it and say, I can see why they came to that solution. That made sense for that family. And then when you get in a room and you hear from an estate planning specialist, a risk professional, a wealth growth professional, they can be like, right, this is actually where the rubber hits the road. This is a family actually doing their doing based on a process that led them to make decisions. So it's a fairly... I want people to walk away and feel like this is a tangible outcome. Like we gained a lot of knowledge from this day, not just sit and have a talk fest.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, it's good. It's a really good day. Love you guys to come if you were free on the 6th of August.
Thanks, Jess.
You never know what
Thank you. We might be. It's a very dry year. You never know.
Sounds interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Little road trip.
Thank you for that. That's awesome. Yeah.
No, and thanks for what you're doing in the industry generally to highlight, the importance of having some of these challenging conversations and get out of our comfort zone to grow. I think that's so important, continuing to challenge ourselves. So thank you for the role you're playing in that.
Thanks, Jess.
Appreciate it, Jess. No, we're just here to have a bit of a yarn.
Thank you. That's lovely.